Well, welcome everyone to another Reltio community show. I'm Chris Detzel, and we have one of our product managers on, Saurab. He did a in-depth kind of overview around LCAs and DVF around data quality a couple of weeks ago, and there was tons of questions around this, and he didn't really get to finish his presentation. So what we're going to do today is he'll give a recap of what we talked about last time. He'll kind of go more in depth about what else is coming and what else he wanted to show. And then we'll start asking specific questions from the audience. So this will be heavily Ask Me Anything with a little bit of demo and things like that to kind of kickstart this particular show. Um, Keep yourself on mute for now. And then once, feel free to always ask questions in the chat and I'll make sure to get to those. But then after the presentation and demo, then we'll get to the questions. And then we do have a show coming up next week. And this will be a deep dive into accelerate custom workflow development. I saw a couple of questions around workflow. Hopefully some of those will be answered on next week's show as well on the community. So other than that, I think that's all I have. I'm going to stop sharing, Saurabh, and let you share.
Thank you, Chris. Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. This is Saurabh, and I'm a senior product manager at Reltio. I look after the LCA and DVF functionality. There are few other areas that I look after, for example, our core APIs, data unification, including survivorship. And I also take care of some of the console apps like the data modeler, user management, tenant management, and so on. Chris already gave a brief overview of where this session is headed and where did we start from. So a couple of weeks back, we did an overview of LCA and DVF feature. And there were too many questions and, we did not have enough time to complete the entire session and the things that I wanted to cover. So we planned for this follow-up session. And what I want to do is first, just go through or do a quick recap of the things that we covered in the previous session. And then I would want to complete the things that I could not show in the previous session. And then we can continue having any questions in between. All right. So this is what we started with. We started with a brief overview of what LCA is. It's the process that allows you to inject custom code into Reltio. So if there's something which is not supported out of the box in the product, you can create your own custom code, and then there are certain hooks that you can use to call your custom code. We support two types of implementations as of now: Lambda functions and the native LCA. And our recommendation is to use Lambda functions because there are benefits. For example, the Lambda functions do not have to be reviewed by the engineering team. You have full control over it. You can download the logs, you can debug, and it makes it easier for you to manage your own Lambda functions since the engineering team and the support team is not involved into deploying those Lambda functions. So these are there are like 32 different set of hooks that we can use to invoke an LCA, and specifically for the before save hook, there's another action. There's another parameter called action type, which gets triggered based on what this save is happening as a result of which operation. Is it like create, update, merge, and so on. So we looked at some of these examples on how or what happens when you try to configure data validation functions, and some of these examples of how it would seem in your L3 configuration when you configure a before save hook or a validate hook. All right. All right. So after that, we also started discussing about data validation functions. So data validation function actually lets you validate any data that you load into Reltio. We have the option to choose whether we want to load that data with warning or do we want to stop that data from loading. So we can configure our data validation functions as error or as warnings. We allow validation functions to occur on entity attributes, and we recently also added capability to validate relationship attributes. And then we have self-service capability in the UI in console data modeler, where you can configure these data validation functions. And post that, I started doing a short demo and started showing how the data validation functions can be configured in the UI. So this is the place where you do it. I mean, in the console, when you go to the data modeler and you select the entity or relationship where you want to configure your data validation functions. Yeah. You select the entity and then you go on the validation functions tab, and all the validation functions that you have already configured will be listed here. So this is where you can configure new validation functions, and you can create your validation functions based on your needs. And we support a whole list of different validation capabilities depending on what attributes you want to validate. So we looked at some of the cases where if it's a string, then what are those different validation functions that you can use. um, we also check that there is also a switch. We can do comparison between the attributes. You can switch to attribute selector and do comparison between attributes of the same entity. Right now, as of now, we do not support validation of attribute or comparison of attributes across different entities. If instead of string, if it is an integer field, say for example, I think we had some rank fields on that. Yeah. Yeah, the functions that you see for an integer, they're completely different than what you would expect uh, in a string. So now you have all the different functions to compare the value of the integer, compare the numerical value, and then again you have the attribute selector here. And finally, we also looked at for date functions, what are the different options that we have. For the date function, we have attribute selector as well as the relative date. So I can also compare a date against the current date of the system. For example, if I choose a relative date, I can choose that, or I can define a validation function that the deactivation date should be after 0 days from the current date. So it should be after the current date. And this is completely configurable. Instead of current date, I can also maybe set it as say -5 or +5 or any number here. And we can also choose days, months, and years. So depending on the use case, we have made it very flexible to configure the validation functions for dates, strings, and integers. So this is what we had already covered in the previous session. What I actually wanted to show you was how once you've configured the data validation function, what do you do next? Okay.
So these
Um,
validation functions are only applicable to the UI, or they can work on the data onboarded via API or
they are applicable for all the channels. When you're
okay,
loading your data into Reltio, you have the option whether you want to switch on the validations or not. So
okay,
depending on the if you have too many validation functions configured on your tenant, then it will obviously impact the time it takes to load the
performance.
data, because there's some, yeah. So
Agree.
some of our customers, they do that. What they do is they'll switch off the validation functions at the time of data loading. Once the
Mm.
data is load is complete, then they revalidate the data. And that is what you are also expected to do for any new validation functions that you create on your existing data. So for
Agree.
example, in this case, I already have a lot of data in my tenant and I create a new validation function. So all the existing data would not be validated as soon as you create a validation function. For this, what we need to do is we need to run the revalidate job, and you'll find the link on the validation function page itself. You come to this job page, and then the revalidate job page, it has now been enhanced to also include relationships. Earlier you could only see entity and entity type and entity URI list, but now the relationships have also been added. So if you want to run if you create a validation function for entity and you want to run that validation function on all the existing data, you select
Mm.
the entity for which you want to do it. Similarly for the relations,
Got it.
select all these details and run the job. And as part of this job, all the data for that entity or specific URIs. If you want to run it for specific URIs, the validation functions would be run, and the messages will be stored in the analytics attributes.
Got it. Okay, thank you. That answers.
Okay, so this was for for the entities. Now we have exactly same the UI and the look and feel for
May
the
I ask a question?
relationships also. Sure, go ahead.
Now, when you go back to the previous screen, the validation capability is by entity type, right?
Yes. Yes.
Can we do validation for the entire subject area? For example, I have a subject area customer that has 10 entities that are all related, and I want to run one function to run the entire subject area.
So as of now, you'll have to configure it for each of those entities, entity types.
Okay. Okay.
I have a question too. Like, can we,
Yeah.
so is this only, can we do only errors and warnings based on the validation? Or can we change the value of attributes as well based on the validation function?
Yeah. As of now, we can only flag it as error or warning. We cannot update the values, or we cannot perform any follow-up actions based on the output of the DVF.
And can we use some other attribute for doing the validation, or only that particular attribute's value has to be used? Like,
No, we can use other attributes also.
Okay.
Let me show some of things. So for example, this is a validation function which checks that if the email type is existing, then the actual value of the email should not be missing. So I'm validating for email, but I'm using email type also in my validation function. And I can use any attribute actually. There's a whole list of attributes, user defined as well as the system defined attributes. We can use any of these in our configuration for the validation function.
Got it. Thank you.
And if you guys don't mind, let's finish with this quick demo, and we'll get to all the questions, I promise.
Right. So we have exactly same experience for the relationship types also. The data validation functions like you configured for entities, you can do the same configuration for the relationship type attributes also. So I already configured one for this relationship type. Yeah. So here again, like I said, the experience is exactly same. You have the user defined attributes on top, then start and end date for the relationship, and the source system name if you want to use it for your validation. And same, all of those features like validation level, validation event, all of those are exactly same. Once you configure it, again, you would have to rerun, or you would have to run the revalidate job for this relationship for which you configure it. Once you've done this configuration, so there are a couple of ways that you can see this data in the UI. Okay, so one of the ways is that you can perform a real-time validation, which happens when this data is loaded. Let me just open this profile again, and maybe you'll be able to see that difference between the real-time validation and the saved validation. So here I'm loading this data. Okay, because this data was already saved. Sorry, give me 1 second. So if you see, the validations do not appear on top here. Okay, it took a little while for these warnings to appear. So what happens is the warnings and the errors that you see on top of the page, these are the real-time validations that happen when you open a profile. If you recall that whenever we enable data validation function for an entity in the L3, we add two hooks for that: a before save hook and a validate hook. So if a validate hook is configured for the entity, then it would do this real-time validation of the data and show the validation here. Okay. The other place where you can see these validations is in the analytics attributes. So we also, looked at when we enable the validation functions, the analytical attributes get added to those entities, and those are the attributes which actually store the errors and warnings on the profile. So these validations, data validations are also available as part of the analytics attributes here. And this needs to be added on the profile. And the way to do it is that you go to your UI configuration and you add a new facet, a single attribute facet. And maybe I'll quickly just show it. So this facet by default, it is not available. Once you enable the data validation functions, you've created a validation functions, and now you want to see those validation errors and warnings in the UI. At that time, you need to add this facet. So what we actually need to do is just create a new single attribute or attribute facet. Okay. And for this facet, we need to choose the analytical or validation attribute validations. Yeah. Choose this attribute validations and enter other details. For example, I put it as data validation. You can give your own caption and so on, and you publish this. Once you publish it, that is when this data validation functions would be added in the profile page, and you'll be able to see all the validations which are captured for this entity here in this page. Okay. So this is where you can see all the validation errors for the entities and for the relationships. The validations appear in the relationship tab. Okay, so here I have 3 different relationships. For this particular relationship, I'd created a validation, and that validation failed, and this is where the details for the validation error or warning appears. And by default, again, this analytical attributes will not be available. So we have to go to the show and hide column and choose the analytics attributes, and that is when they start appearing here. And the validations also happen on the real time. For example, right now, if you see that this says that the title should be provided for active relationship. Okay, now if I go to this relationship and I add the title. I've now added the title and I've resolved the warning. And if I now go back to the relationship, you'll see that the validation error or warning is gone. So in the real time, it performs the validation and gives out the results in these pages. Similarly, on the profile page, whatever warnings or errors that you see here, if I correct those, if I update my data to correct these data validations, these validations will go away. All right. So I think, Chris, I'm done with the demo. This is what I wanted to cover, like the end-to-end flow on how do you configure validations and then how do you make them available in the UI. So I'm done with my demo, and we can now switch to the question and answers.
Great. So there's already questions, so I'll start asking them. So is there any idea on LCA implementation in any one of the Azure technology rather than only in LAMBDA, Lambda?
Yeah, so right now we do not support functions, Azure functions as LCAs. We only support native and Lambda functions. And in case the customer is natively on another cloud like Azure or GCP, we can host their Lambda function into Reltio AWS account. But at the moment, we do not have support for Azure functions and GCP functions.
Okay. Can LCA actions, Lambda one, can it be asynchronous?
No, so it actually it will be it is used for synchronous calls only, because depending on where you put your hook, for example, you want to perform certain validations before a delete happens. Like if somebody is trying to delete a profile, you have to check that it should not have an active relationship with another profile. So these kind of validations, when you code your LCA, you put it against a particular hook. You'll say that before merge, this code has to run. So it will happen in real time in a synchronous manner. In synchronous manner. For asynchronous, we suggest that you work with the events and you stream the events and perform updates based on the events.
Okay. Can we change the value or assign a new value to the attribute based on the validation condition on that attribute?
Not with DVFs. We can do that with LCA. So you can use LCA to inject any custom code. If you want to change the value of a particular attribute, you can do it using LCA, but not using DVF. The DVF is only used to flag an entity or a relationship if it has errors or warnings, but it does not allow you to perform any follow-up actions based on the flag.
Okay. And I think this might have been answered, but just in case there's more info, can you explicitly define a DVF as before save hook? If yes, how? I think Engino said you can mark it as an error, not a warning.
So yeah, so DVFs is always for a before save hook. Right now, DVF that we support is only for before save hook, and we support two types of action on it, which is like before create and before update. Sorry, for create and update. Let me go to that configuration again. So whenever I create a DVF, so these are the, if you remember, we talked about certain actions which are supported with before save hook. These are those actions: create, update, or create and update both. And DVFs, whenever I configure DVF, as of now, it is only configured with before save hook. We do not support the other hooks right now. So I might want to put a validation before merge or after merge or before delete, but those validations are not supported with DVF right now.
Okay. So there was some good information there. So in DVF, we are checking the RDM lookup error as of now. Same like lookup error. Can we check RDM lookup parent as well?
No, we cannot. So I think with DVF we cannot check it, but we have other capabilities in the system to do that. I'm not entirely sure right now how we can or how do we support it. Abra might have taken a session on that, I think few weeks back when he covered RDM. But with DVF we cannot perform that check.
Okay. Is there a possibility that Nali wants a demo on LCA? Is that something that in the future we can do that or did we do that last time? I
Uh,
don't think we did.
No, we did not. So a detailed session on the LCA, we did not like a demo and all. We have in a documentation, we have a step-by-step guide on how do you deploy your LCA. So once you have created an LCA, you create a jar file, and then there's a whole process on how do you deploy those jar files. We can do that session in future. I think it will be helpful. Yeah, if people are interested, we can do it in future.
I think the answer will be yes, but definitely we'll look at the future on doing that. How do we revalidate only the last loaded entities?
We validate only the last. So right now we cannot like put a like a filter condition on date or anything. So
Can we?
either you can
Can I take that question, Saurabh? So
yeah,
we
yeah,
can do
Shiva.
Yes. Revalidation task. There is support. There is an attribute called update since customer can
Okay.
update since like 30th October, and what
Okay.
is that are post the 30th October will be revalidated, not across the entire.
Okay. I wasn't aware. Thank you for that, Shiva. So looks like we do have a parameter and that so it is not in the UI yet, but I think the API supports that parameter. We can use that to give a date, and only entities after that date will be revalidated.
And these data validation functions are continuously applied during the data lifecycle, during data pipeline from load to match to merge to master.
Yes. So every time there's an operation which causes the data to be saved, because these data validation functions are applied before save, so it will trigger the validation.
And what if you want to remove all the bad error validations from the pipeline?
Sorry, which pipeline are you talking about? I mean, during data load, if you want to.
The entire data load pipeline, right? From load to match to merge to master, you have the entire pipeline, right? In that pipeline, after the load, if I find out there are 10 errors and I want to exclude them from the next step, is that possible? And send the bad records to a steward for validation.
Can I interject here? This is Gino. Yeah, we don't Reltio doesn't have a pipeline, right? We're a real-time operation. So, there is no pipeline to take it from stage to merge so it all happens in real time at one step.
Oh, I thought I saw somewhere that there is a distinct pipeline. Maybe I'm mistaken. But even in that process, even in real time, before I exclude records, before I want to master them, how do I do that? Or I can't do that?
No, the data, the validation happens on load, and on load, all the other functions happen at the same time. So if you want to exclude it, you're making an error, right? As being shown here on the screen. And the data is not loaded.
And the data is not loaded. So if the market is an error, the data is never loaded.
Yeah.
Correct.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Gino.
Okay. Next question. Do the brackets in DVF Advanced Builder work the same way as another programming language to nest and or conditions for nested attributes?
Yes, they do. The only thing to remember right now is it is not supported in the function builder. We have to. Sorry, I hear an echo. We have to switch to advanced editor, and yes, the brackets work the same way. It is used for nesting and subnesting.
Okay. Did you want to add anything else, Saurab, to that?
No, is there any, is there any follow-up question on this? No,
So Saurabh,
yeah,
it was
go ahead,
raised by
please.
me. So if I use the function builder and then convert that to a advanced function builder, like if I just convert it, can I just put brackets to say that you
Yes,
first
you can.
consider the inner bracket and then you come out and then validate this?
Right. And that is what we'll also suggest you to do if you have to build complex functions. You can use the function builder to create a simpler version of it and then switch to advanced editor and add all the other things which are not supported in the function builder right now.
Okay. And just a follow-up question. So the filters for all attributes, like whether they are parent attributes or nested attributes, must work the same way, right? Like if you tell equals, it needs to work across all attributes the same way.
Sorry, I did not completely understand the question, but it will depend on, I think what I understand is you're talking about this attribute, right? Whether this attribute is a nested, a sub-nested, or a simple attribute, right?
Yeah. Like if I give the same filter conditions for the attribute that is a parent attribute or a nested attribute, the functionality of it must work the same way, right? Because we see some inconsistencies, so we didn't know if it was because it's a nested attribute or like, is there any conditions like that why it's not working the same way?
So you would only be able to select the sub-nested attributes. I mean, the parent attribute, I don't think you should be able to select the parent attribute, right?
The question may be, Saurabh, that for the nested attribute, we would need to use the in-same attribute, right? So that could be the answer for that. So if you're trying to use the multiple emails and you're trying to validate just the the office email, so in that case, you got to put the in-same attribute and the following
Yeah.
the conditions. So that is this is applicable for the nested attribute. If it is a
And
standalone,
in-same attribute is not supported in the function builder, right?
Right now, it is not supported. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right.
you could use the advanced editor for that matter.
And when we use in-same attribute for, like, if we nest a in-same attribute inside a in-same attribute, does it work the same way as any other nested? Like, it considers the inside nest first and then validates the outside. Like, can you nest a in-same attribute inside an in-same attribute?
I have not
Got
tried
the
it.
question.
So if there's multiple nesting for,
Yes.
and we want to use in same attribute for the lower nest and the upper nest also. So is it possible, or will it work the same way? I mean, if I have in same attribute and then another in same attribute in the outer bracket.
Correct.
Can you say one example?
Maybe something like, and then again there's in same attribute.
Yes, and there is like a or condition again,
Yeah.
like inside the same attribute, and there are or and ands. Like, it's a complex function if you want to build. Is it supported for two nested in same attributes?
Okay, so can I take this as an example, like that you're trying to verify an address which is in US with the zip code so and so. That the zip code is again nested. Address is being nested. The zip code is nested in the address. So we will have to check this. Can you post this question into the community? We will get that answer in that community.
Yes.
Yeah.
By the way, have you tried it and did you face any problems, or
Yeah, I
you not
did
yet?
try. So it's working for some attributes. It's not working for all attributes consistently. So
Okay.
so we don't know if the attribute is the issue or in-same attribute is the issue.
Okay. Yeah, I think it'll help. We'll need to see that example. So if we can post it in community, we can check it out on our end.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just go to community.reltio.com and then post. We'll make sure to get that answered. Can LCA support bulk load? I feel like we might have answered this, but I'm not sure.
LCA support bulk load. I did not understand the question. Why would you want to use LCA to perform bulk load?
The question
No.
misunderstood. Original question was, would it have a performance issue during the bulk upload? So when we have LCS.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, so there will be performance impact depending on how complex the LCA is, how many operations or what kind of operations the LCA is doing. There will be performance impact. As of now, we do not have anything which is posted or something which is documented in a doc portal to explain or to give you an estimate of what that performance impact will be like. But a lot of customers, they do this in if they do not if they want to perform these if they can perform these LCAs after the load, then they switch off the LCA execution during the load. Once the data is loaded, then they can I'm sorry. Shiva, will it be possible to rerun the LCAs also?
No, Saurabh, we don't have that.
Okay, I'm really sorry. No, so it is not possible. I mean, there will be performance impact, and the performance impact will depend on how complex the LCA is. For
Sure. And
DVF, we have that option where we can, switch off the DVFs and then rerun it after the data is loaded. But for LCA, we don't have that yet. Sorry.
sure. And on continuation on the same thing. Okay. As far as I remember from, I think, one of your meetings, or even when we approached Reltio team for implementing LCS also, okay, they were hesitant to recommend LCA at that time because they were, I mean, like Reltio were trying to sunset the LCA. Instead, they wanted to bring in new capability on in the replace of LCA. Okay, so, but
Mm-hmm.
I see that again now LCA is being discussed in our communities. Okay,
Yeah.
has radio stance got changed that you guys are again supporting LCA, or what is the point? I mean, what is the objective on this one, sir? Or maybe you
So,
take
uh, so
on this.
so basically, we are also trying to promote RIH. If there are operations that can be performed using RIH, that is another way to do it. Uh, if we have to use the LCAs for like synchronous operations, we recommend to use Lambda functions and not native LCAs. If it is for asynchronous purpose, you can use RIH to perform those tasks.
Okay, so RI is in another version of LCA.
No, so RIH is RIH is it stands for Reltio Integration Hub. It helps you
That's
create. So in RIH, you can create recipes and then perform actions. You can integrate it with another application. You can fetch data from Reltio, perform all kinds of operations that you want to perform, and then integrate with other applications also. Um, and you can find some good documentation on RIH. I think this needs to be enabled for tenant if the tenant has requirement for it. So you can reach out to support to get it enabled in your tenant. But for asynchronous operations, RIH is also an option that we promote.
no, okay. Thank you. And
Go ahead, Jay.
and one of the sessions last year that I remember, a Lambda can be written, or relative team is trying to support, that is LCA can be implemented using Python as well.
Uh, I, I as of now we are not working on it. Thiru or Shiva, do you guys have any update on it?
Yes,
Was it
there are
in our
some.
plan?
Yeah, when once we move to some other clouds, we have that in roadmap, but we don't have any like we have not started anything working on that.
Yeah.
It's all.
So as of now, it is not. I mean, we do not have any plans for it. Maybe a couple of years down the line, we might start working on it, or depending on the need. I mean, if you think that this is a good feature, could help you, I would suggest that you create an idea on our ideas portal, try to get some votes, and depending on how useful other customers also find it, we might pick it up sooner.
Sure. Yeah.
All right, and looks like one more question. Do we have plans to allow a validation job to be scheduled in the modeler, or would RIH be the recommended route to check for like expired dates?
Uh, as of now, right, because we do not have anything in the roadmap to allow it to be scheduled, but through RIH, it's mentioned in the question already, through RIH we can do that. We can trigger the jobs on schedule.
Great. It looks like for now that's all of the questions. Does anybody want to ask anything else on this Ask Me Anything?
Thanks, Chris. Yeah, I wanted to ask one thing
Sure.
that is completely or not related to this topic, but extent version of it. So, one of the session last year in April, I attended about the data cleansers. Okay,
Mhm.
and it was I think I have made a comment in the community portal also, but again, just wanted to run through it as. So address cleanser can be exposed via as an external API, right, to cleanse the data, even before entering into Reltio. Okay, so this is the. I mean, I lost track of the API at that moment. Okay, would any of you would be able to send me the API details and the payload or the body of the API to use it? I have searched
Okay.
in the doc portals, but I could not find the right API that the demo during the demo was
Yeah,
using.
you can
Okay.
search for on-fly cleans. We'll share in the chat. The docs portal that is already there. We'll share that link.
Sure, sure. Do you
Or
mind share me
or
the
you can,
body of the API also, sample one? Yeah.
I
sorry, I was
think
saying again, if you can put it in community, so it'll be easier for us to answer on community. You can look at the share the link there on the community itself.
Yeah, and there's a couple of shows that we did or webinars that were live on some of that. So maybe that'll help. But yeah, definitely post on the community and we'll make sure to get the information there, community.reltio.com. So we do have another question. We have a lot of DVF created and updated one entity. Then how much time will it take to give us the DVF warning in the profile page?
Um, Again, so we internally we do have some performance metrics, but it is not yet exposed on the doc portal. Our plan is that we'll do a kind of a detailed analysis on what is the impact as we increase the number of data validation functions, what is the impact on performance, and we'll try to post it on the doc portal. Right now, I do not have any numbers in like top of my head. I'll have to look at some data and find out.
Okay.
Is there any best practices we can follow? Because like for 1 million data that we have currently, we have around 12 DVF that is active. And if we
Okay.
do multiple updates for like one entity, uh, like changing the DVF, we don't get the updates very fast. So is there any best practices that we could use to improve the performance using DVF?
Um, so nothing that I can think of the top of my head right now, but maybe we can look at your the validation functions that you are performing. So it's like the validation functions are executed one after the other. So if there are certain validation functions which are not required on update, maybe just set it up for create only, or if you want to perform it on all the updates, only then keep it for updates. And then I mean, depending on the validation functions, we'll have to look at individual cases if there's a possibility to modify it and improve the performance a little bit.
Okay.
But
And just one last question.
yeah, sorry, I
Yeah,
was saying
you
we do recommend to use DVF wherever validations can be performed using DVF instead of LCAs. So if you're already using DVF and you one of the things which I can recommend and that I've seen one of the other customers do it is they did not want to run the real-time validation or they did not want to see the box that I showed on top in the UI earlier where the real-time validations happen and the messages appear on top. So if you don't want that because that is where the real-time validation happens and it takes more time to update. So if you do not want to see those messages over there, then you can remove the validate hook and the messages will keep appearing in the facet that you've added. So that way, I think the load time will be a little better.
the analytics attribute is faster than the profile pane warning, is it?
Yes.
And one last question. So there are APIs for like get entity. For one entity, you can get the entire details, right? So is the analytics attribute in that get entity call faster than, I mean, or faster or more correct than the one that is there in the profile pane warning?
No, so it's actually same.
No, it takes some time to show up. So we wanted to know like which is more.
So get entity, the data is already stored, right? So when you make an update on the profile, at the time of saving the data, the analytical attributes get updated. And after that, if you make a get entity call, you reading from the already saved data. So that is definitely faster than a real-time validation, which would happen on the UI if you refresh the page.
Okay, okay. So
So
profile
this,
pane is a little slower.
yes, yes. And that is why I'm suggesting that if you don't really need that profile page, maybe you can remove the validate who can not have those messages on the profile page on top, and just rely on the analytical attributes facet to see the warnings and errors.
Thank you.
We do have another question. As for data validation, is there a plan to have a validation of field linked in the safe search? So let's say, show me customer names containing more than 40 characters and or make it a dynamic validation. So example could be user enters the data and sees the limit for the given field and Reltio counts it on the way as the data is entered.
So real-time validation would not happen. I mean, the last example, this real-time validation is not possible, but you can use regex, regular expressions, to create a data validation function to check the length of an attribute.
Okay. Maria, does it help, or is there any additional?
It does, but I do have some supporting questions. So real time, that's fine. For today, it's not possible. Is there any plan to think through it? At least, especially for the workflows, because this is something that would definitely help users to understand a bit more of what is in the workflow and how much they can manipulate the data they got from the original request.
To be honest, Maria, I'm not sure right now if it is in the pipeline, because so we have different product owners for different areas. My suggestion would be to, again, either post it on community to see if there's already a workaround or if there's already a way to do it. And if there's not, then create a ideas ticket so that the correct product owner can look at it and study the feasibility and plan it.
All right, I think this explains, because essentially, if this was in the pipeline, probably you would know that. So I'll post it, and then we'll see if it requires an idea or some other steps. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Maria. All right. I'm going to give it another 5-10 seconds, see if there's any other questions. So Rob, nice work. Really appreciate it. He wondered, he goes, I'm not sure if there's going to be tons of questions since we answered. I was like, no, there is. So, all right. Well, thank you everyone for coming to another Reltio community show. We do have one next week on workflows. I think there's some changes in that are for the good. So please come to that one on the 9th. Go to community.reltio.com, go to events, and then RSVP for that one. This is recorded and will be posted to the community in the next day or two. So thank you everyone, and I will see some of you next week.